Ladies and gentlemen, every one of us at some point in life will meet someone who thrives on control. Someone who twists words, plays games, and leaves you questioning yourself more than you ever question them. They drain your energy, test your patience, and keep you caught in cycles of chaos that never end. And when you're in it, it feels impossible to break free. Because every reaction, every explanation, every ounce of effort only seems to give them more power. But what if I told you the power has never been theirs to begin with? What if the strength to break freed isn't about shouting louder or fighting harder, but about shifting the way you respond? This is how the so-called powerless become unstoppable. This is how the person they thought they could break becomes the one who breaks the cycle. Empathy is power, not weakness. People often misunderstand what empathy really is. They confuse it with being overly nice, being passive, or being someone who lets others walk all over them. But true empathy is none of those things. It is not about shrinking yourself down or abandoning your boundaries just to keep others comfortable. It is about understanding people so deeply that you can see not only their actions, but also the motives and wounds behind those actions. That level of awareness gives you strength that most people can't even recognize because they are too focused on fighting battles they don't understand. Think about what happens in a room full of conflict. Most people pick sides, raise their voices, and defend their positions with anger. But the person with empathy doesn't get caught in the noise. They hear what is being said, but they also hear what is not being said. They pick up on the fear behind the anger, the insecurity behind the pride, and the pain behind the aggression. That ability to see beneath the surface is power. It allows them to respond with clarity instead of chaos. They are not controlled by someone else's emotions because they can recognize where those emotions come from. That insight turns empathy into strategy. Empathy is often mistaken for weakness because it is quiet. It doesn't push itself into the spotlight. It doesn't need to dominate the room to prove its value. But silence should never be confused with surrender. A calm mind can make decisions that a reactive mind cannot. When you understand people at their core, you know which battles are worth fighting and which ones are designed only to drain you. That saves your energy, protects your peace, and keeps your focus sharp. That is not weakness. That is discipline in its highest form. Someone without empathy will lash out, argue, or try to control every situation. Someone with empathy has the power to step back, listen, and choose how to engage. That choice is what separates the powerless from the powerful. When you have empathy, you don't just see the surface behavior, you see the root. And when you can see the root, you're no longer tricked by the disguise. You can't be manipulated the same way. You can't be easily provoked. You can't be led into traps set by anger, pride, or insecurity. You stand grounded in understanding, and that makes you unshakable. Another reason empathy is so powerful is because it disarms people. When someone expects a fight and instead meets calm understanding, their entire strategy crumbles. Anger thrives on reaction. Manipulation feeds on confusion. Control survives on fear. But empathy doesn't give them those things. Instead, it gives them clarity. It reflects their behavior back to them without hostility. That kind of mirror forces people to confront themselves, whether they want to or not. And in that moment, the one with empathy holds the upper hand. Empathy also creates influence. People are drawn to those who understand them. They trust those who make them feel seen and heard. That trust builds relationships, opens doors, and creates opportunities that force alone could never achieve. Influence is not about control. It is about connection. And empathy is the deepest connection you can form with another human being. Leaders who lack empathy may gain compliance through fear, but leaders with empathy inspire loyalty through respect. That difference is what sustains real power over time. What many don't realize is that empathy is not just about others. It is also about yourself. It is about recognizing your own emotions, your own triggers, and your own patterns. When you can understand yourself, you gain mastery over your reactions. You stop letting anger dictate your words. You stop letting fear control your choices. You stop letting insecurity push you into situations that don't serve you. Self-empathy creates self-control, and self-control creates freedom. That is one of the strongest forms of power anyone can ever hold. There is also a resilience that comes with empathy. When you can understand why people do what they do, their cruelty or harshness no longer has the same sting. You begin to see that hurt people hurt people. You realize that most attacks are not about you at all, but about their own pain spilling out. That doesn't excuse their behavior, but it frees you from carrying their poison. You don't absorb it as truth. You recognize it as projection. That recognition protects your spirit from being broken by the cruelty of others. And that kind of resilience is something no one can take away from you. In a world that often mistakes loudness for strength, empathy proves that real power is quiet. It doesn't have to shout to be effective. It doesn't have to dominate to win. It doesn't have to control to lead. Real power lies in the ability to understand, to connect, to choose your response, and to stay steady when everything else around you is shaking. Empathy holds that power, and those who learn to embrace it discover that it is not weakness at all. It is their greatest strength. A narcissist feeds on reaction. Silence starves them. The reason they provoke, poke, and push is not because they want resolution, but because they want energy. They don't care if it is positive energy or negative energy. What matters is that you give them your attention, your emotions, and your time. The more you react, the more powerful they feel. It becomes fuel for them. Proof that they still have control over how you think and how you feel. But when you refuse to give them what they want, when you stay calm and withhold the reaction they're desperate to pull out of you, that is when their power begins to crumble. A narcissist's favorite stage is chaos. They want arguments that drag on for hours, text battles that leave you drained, and conversations where you feel like you're losing your mind trying to defend what is obviously true. Every outburst, every explanation, every desperate attempt to get them to understand is exactly what keeps them strong. Because in their world, it's not about truth, it's about control. As long as you are reacting, they are winning. But the moment you learn the strength of silence, you remove the very oxygen they need to survive. Silence is not weakness. It is strategy. It is the conscious choice not to enter into a fight. You cannot win because the rules of that fight are designed against you. A narcissist doesn't argue to find solutions. They argue to exhaust you. They twist words, rewrite history, and move goalposts so that no matter what you say, you are wrong. If you respond with anger, they say you're unstable. If you respond with logic, they say you're overthinking. If you respond with hurt, they say you're too sensitive. The only way to win is not to play, and silence is how you step off their stage. When you don't react, something shifts. They are left with their words echoing back to themselves with no energy to bounce off of. They try harder at first, pressing buttons, pushing limits, saying things they know are cruel just to get you to flinch. But when you don't bite, when you remain still and unmoved, they feel the emptiness of their own performance. It's like watching someone clap on a stage with no audience. Eventually, the act collapses under its own weight. Silence is powerful because it says, I am no longer available to be controlled by your behavior. It communicates boundaries without needing explanation. It doesn't give them material to twist or ammunition to use against you later. It leaves them with nothing to work with. That nothing is what they cannot handle. Because for a narcissist, the greatest fear is irrelevance, and silence makes them irrelevant. Of course, silence is not always easy. It requires a level of self-control that feels unnatural at first. Every part of you wants to defend yourself, correct the lie, or prove your point, but the more you explain, the deeper you sink into their game. Silence is not about pretending they are right. It is about knowing the truth so clearly within yourself that you no longer feel the need to hand it over for their approval. You hold it quietly, firmly, and with certainty. That is strength. What silence also does is return power back to you. Instead of letting them dictate the pace and tone of the conversation, you reclaim your time and energy. You decide where your focus goes. You choose peace over conflict. You stop letting their chaos pull you into storms that were never yours to carry. Every time you stay silent instead of reacting, you are training yourself in emotional discipline. And that discipline becomes a shield that no manipulation can penetrate. Silence does not mean staying in the relationship either. Sometimes silence is physical as much as it is emotional. It can mean walking away completely, cutting off access, and refusing to be drawn back into the same cycle again. That kind of silence is the ultimate starvation for a narcissist, because they are not just missing your reaction, they are missing you altogether. It is the kind of silence that says, you no longer have a seat at my table. What happens when you starve a narcissist of reaction is that their tactics become louder, harsher, and more desperate. They may accuse, play the victim, or try to guilt you back into engagement. But if you stay grounded, if you refuse to be moved, their desperation eventually turns into exposure. Their patterns become visible not only to you, but to everyone around them. And while they lose credibility, you gain strength, dignity, and peace. A narcissist feeds on reaction, silence starves them. The moment you choose calm over chaos, clarity over argument, and peace over performance, you shift the balance of power. You are no longer their fuel source. You are no longer their stage. You are no longer their game. You take back the one thing they can't survive without your attention. And once you do, they no longer get to define the story. You do. Clarity cuts through manipulation. That is one truth most people never realize until they've lived through the chaos of being pulled into someone else's game. Manipulators thrive on confusion. They twist words, rewrite history, and create so much emotional fog that you begin to doubt what's real and what's not. Their greatest weapon isn't always anger or control. It's distortion. They make you question your own memory, your own judgment, even your own worth. And as long as you're caught in that fog, you'll always feel powerless. But the moment clarity enters, everything changes. Clarity is like light in a dark room. The moment you switch it on, the shadows lose their shape. What once felt terrifying becomes obvious for what it is. That's why manipulators fear clarity more than confrontation. If you yell at them, they can spin it into proof that you're unstable. If you cry, they'll say you're too emotional. If you argue, they'll find a way to flip your words. But when you become clear, when your words are simple, steady, and firm, there is nothing for them to twist. You stop feeding the fog. You start cutting through it. Clarity is power because it takes away the manipulator's favorite weapon, confusion. For example, when someone tries to guilt you by saying, after everything I've done for you, you're really going to say no. Clarity responds with, yes, I'm saying no. Nothing more, nothing less, no defense, no apology, just truth. When they try to gaslight you with, that never happened, clarity says, I remember it clearly and I stand by it. Not a debate, not a fight, just a steady acknowledgement of what you know to be true. That simplicity doesn't give them room to twist the story. It stops manipulation in its tracks. What makes clarity so effective is that it is not reactive, it is intentional. A manipulator wants you off balance. They want you flustered, stumbling over your words, scrambling to explain yourself. The more you explain, the easier it is for them to twist your explanations against you. Clarity doesn't explain, it states. It doesn't get dragged into endless details. It focuses on the core truth. And when you stand in that kind of truth, it becomes a shield they can't break. Clarity is also emotional, as much as it is verbal. It's not just about the words you say, but the way you carry yourself when you say them. A clear voice doesn't shake. A clear mind doesn't second guess. A clear heart doesn't need validation. Manipulators prey on uncertainty. So the less uncertain you are, the less control they have. When you know exactly what you stand for, exactly what you will allow, and exactly what you will not, you can't be pulled into someone else's confusion. You're rooted. And rooted people can't be easily moved. It's important to understand that clarity doesn't always mean confrontation. Sometimes clarity is as simple as walking away. Sometimes it's no longer responding to text designed to bait you. Sometimes it's choosing not to engage in arguments where the outcome has already been scripted against you. Clarity isn't about proving yourself to them. It's about proving to yourself that you see what's happening and you refuse to lose yourself in it again. Clarity is uncomfortable for manipulators because it forces them to face themselves. They can't stand in a storm of confusion when you've stripped it down to the truth. They can't dodge accountability when your words are simple and precise. And that discomfort often makes them lash out because nothing exposes manipulation faster than someone who refuses to be confused. Their power relies on you doubting yourself. Your clarity destroys that by showing them you don't. What clarity also does is give you back your peace. When you stop over-explaining, stop defending, stop spinning in circles, trying to get them to understand, you reclaim your energy. You no longer chase their approval or their acknowledgement. You no longer play their game of who remembers what correctly or who's seeing it wrong. You know what? You hold your truth firmly. That freedom from their confusion is what makes clarity so powerful. It's not just about cutting through their manipulation. It's about liberating yourself from it. Many people mistake clarity for coldness, but it's not cold. It's clean. It removes the clutter, the drama, the traps, and the endless loops of manipulation. It gives you space to breathe again. It reminds you that your words don't have to be paragraphs long to matter. Sometimes the strongest statement is just one sentence. Sometimes the clearest answer is just no. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to be pulled into a fight that was never about truth in the first place. Clarity cuts through manipulation because it cannot be twisted. It cannot be spun. It cannot be used against you. It stands on its own, solid and simple. And when you find that kind of clarity in yourself, you stop being the victim of someone else's game and start being the author of your own. Boundaries aren't walls, they're doors you control. A lot of people misunderstand boundaries. They think setting a boundary means shutting people out forever or cutting off the world. They picture a wall, something tall, cold, and unbreakable. But real boundaries aren't about isolation. They're about choice. A boundary is not a prison you build to trap yourself inside. It's a door you choose when and how to open. That choice is where your power lives. When you don't have boundaries, other people decide for you. They decide how much of your time they take, how much of your energy they drain, and how much of your peace they disturb. Without boundaries, you're wide open, and anyone can walk in whenever they want. That's why life feels exhausting when you have none. You're constantly reacting instead of deciding. But when you build boundaries, you don't close yourself off from the world. You create a doorway where you're in charge of who enters, how long they stay, and under what conditions. Boundaries are misunderstood because people often feel guilty about them. They believe saying no is selfish. They believe limiting access means they don't care. But boundaries aren't selfish. They're essential. You can't give love, energy, or kindness to others if you're drained and resentful. Boundaries protect your ability to give. They're the difference between giving freely and giving out of obligation. One builds connection, the other builds resentment. The beauty of boundaries being doors, not walls, is that they're flexible. A wall blocks everything, good or bad, but a door gives you the freedom to choose. You can open it wide to people who respect you, who bring peace, and who build you up. You can keep it closed to those who manipulate, disrespect, or harm. That choice allows you to stay open-hearted without being unprotected. You can still care for people without being consumed by them. You can still listen without absorbing their chaos. You can still love without losing yourself. When you treat your boundaries as doors, you also learn that they're not permanent fixtures. They're adjustable. You might allow someone close today, but if they stop respecting that access, you close the door. Or someone might have hurt you in the past, but through growth and trust, you decide to open it again. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. You're not trapping yourself behind a wall of fear. You're managing access with clarity. That kind of flexibility keeps you both strong and compassionate. Boundaries are also not about punishment. They're about protection. Too often people think, if I set a boundary, I'm being harsh. I'm pushing people away. But a healthy boundary isn't meant to push anyone. It's meant to protect your peace. If someone respects your boundary, they will understand it. If someone resents it, it reveals how much they were benefiting from your lack of one. Boundaries don't harm healthy relationships. They expose unhealthy ones. The door metaphor also shows that boundaries aren't about control over others. They're about control over yourself. You cannot force someone to act the way you want, but you can decide how close you let them stand. You can't change their behavior, but you can change your access. That shift puts the power back in your hands. You stop waiting for people to treat you right, and you start enforcing how you will and won't be treated. That enforcement is the lock on your door. You don't need to scream at someone to get out. You just quietly close the door and remove their access. That calm firmness is power. The most liberating part of boundaries is realizing you don't have to explain them to everyone. A door doesn't give a speech every time it's locked. The same goes for you. You don't need long explanations or apologies. Sometimes the only explanation you owe is, "This doesn't work for me." Simple, clear, done. That's not cruelty. That's clarity. And clarity is what keeps you free from manipulation. It's also worth noting that people who truly care about you won't see your boundaries as rejection. They'll see them as respect. They'll understand that you're protecting your well-being so that you can show up healthier and stronger in the relationship. Only those who wanted unlimited access to your energy will accuse you of being cold, selfish, or difficult. That's not a sign that your boundaries are wrong. It's proof they were needed. When you start viewing your boundaries as doors, not walls, you stop living in extremes. You don't have to choose between letting everyone in or shutting everyone out. You don't have to choose between being a people pleaser or being isolated. You can be open without being overrun. You can be kind without being controlled. You can be available without being drained. Because the truth is, peace doesn't come from shutting people out. It comes from deciding who earns the right to come in. Boundaries aren't walls. They're doors you control. They remind you that you are the one holding the handle. You are the one who decides. You are the one who protects your peace. And once you live with that truth, no one gets unlimited access to you unless you say so. A calm response disarms their chaos. That's the secret manipulators, narcissists, and toxic people never want you to discover. Their entire strategy is built on pulling you into their storm. They thrive on drama. They poke at you until you explode, then point to your explosion as proof that you're the problem. They create chaos and then wait for you to match it. Because the moment you do, they have control. But when you stay calm, when you refuse to meet their chaos with more chaos, the game ends. Chaos feeds on reaction. It's like fire. It spreads only when it finds something to burn. Your anger, your yelling, your defensiveness, that's the oxygen. But when you choose calm, you take away the oxygen. You give the fire nothing to grow with. That's why calm is so powerful. It's not passive. It's not weakness. It's strategy. It's the discipline of holding your ground without being dragged into their storm. Think about the times you've been pulled into arguments that went nowhere. Hours wasted, energy drained, your peace shattered. At the end, nothing was solved, but you were left exhausted while they seemed strangely satisfied. That's because your reaction gave them exactly what they wanted. Proof that they still had control over your emotions. But the moment you respond calmly, their entire plan collapses. They can't twist calm into instability. They can't turn calm into guilt. They can't spin calm into proof of anything. Calm gives them nothing to work with. A calm response doesn't mean you don't feel anger. It doesn't mean you agree with what they're saying. It doesn't mean you're weak. It means you've mastered your emotions enough not to hand them over for free. Calm is restraint. Calm is focus. Calm is control. When you respond with calm instead of chaos, you remind yourself and them that you decide how you show up. You refuse to let someone else dictate your mood or your choices. That is power. Manipulators hate calm because it exposes them. When you don't react, their tactics become more obvious to everyone else. Their raised voices, their insults, their dramatics. Without your reaction to balance it out, it stands out like a spotlight. Calm is a mirror that forces them to see their own chaos. And while they spiral louder, you remain steady. That contrast disarms them because they can't explain it away. They can't twist your silence into instability. They can't convince others you're the problem when you're the one holding steady. Calm also protects your peace. It stops you from saying things you'll regret later, from being pulled into endless debates that lead nowhere, and from wasting your energy on someone who's not interested in understanding. Tunta says, I see what you're doing and I won't participate. That quiet refusal is more powerful than shouting ever could be. You're not giving in. You're not agreeing. You're simply not allowing yourself to be dragged down to their levels. It's important to understand that calm is not the same as silence. Silence can sometimes be avoidance, but calm is intentional. Calm can still be clear, still be firm, still set boundaries. A calm no is stronger than a defensive paragraph. A calm I disagree is sharper than an argument that spirals out of control. Calm doesn't mean saying nothing. It means saying what needs to be said without the chaos that they want you to add. Remaining calm also trains you in emotional discipline. The more you practice it, the less power anyone has over you. You start realizing that not every insult deserves a reply. Not every accusation deserves a defense. Not every provocation deserves a reaction. You learn to conserve your energy for things that truly matter instead of wasting it on chaos designed to distract you. That discipline is what keeps you strong long after the argument is over. Of course, staying calm isn't easy. It takes practice. It means learning how to pause before responding, how to breathe when your body wants to fight, and how to remind yourself that their behavior is a reflection of them, not of you. But with time, calm becomes your default. And once it does, manipulators can't reach you the same way anymore. Their chaos becomes noise instead of control. Their storm becomes background instead of battles. The truth is, calm doesn't just disarm their chaos. It protects your power. Because the moment you let chaos pull you in, you've handed them your control. But when you stay calm, you remain in charge of yourself. You don't get tossed around by their storm. You stand steady, rooted, unshaken, and no matter how loud they get, your calm presence becomes the final word. Respecting yourself is the one thing they can't steal. People can try to take your time, your energy, your patience. They can lie about you, twist your words, and even damage your reputation. They can strip away money, opportunities, and sometimes even relationships. But there's one thing no manipulator, no narcissist, no toxic person can ever truly take from you unless you hand it over. And that is your self-respect. Self-respect is the foundation everything else is built on. It's the quiet voice inside you that says, I deserve better than this. It's the reason you walk away when staying would mean betraying yourself. It's the strength that keeps you from shrinking down just to fit into someone else's version of you. When you respect yourself, you refuse to be treated as less than what you are. That refusal is what makes it impossible for anyone to truly own you. The reason narcissists and toxic people work so hard to break down your confidence is because they know that as long as you respect yourself, they can't control you. They can manipulate your emotions, but they can't rewrite your worth. They can insult you, but they can't make you believe it unless you agree. They can try to convince you that you're too much or not enough. But when you have self-respect, those words don't stick. They bounce off because you know who you are without needing them to define it. Respecting yourself is not arrogance. It's alignment. It's choosing to honor your values, your boundaries, and your truth, even when it makes other people uncomfortable. It's saying no without apologizing. It's walking away without guilt. It's refusing to explain yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. That kind of respect is unshakable because it doesn't depend on external validation. It comes from within, and anything that comes from within cannot be stolen. When you don't respect yourself, every attack feels like proof. Every criticism cuts deep. Every insult feels personal, but when you respect yourself, you know the difference between someone's opinion and your identity. You can listen without absorbing. You can hear the words without letting them rewrite your truth. You stop internalizing their chaos as your own. That separation is freedom because it breaks their hold over you. Self-respect also changes the way you carry yourself. You no longer beg for people to stay. You no longer chase after those who mistreat you. You no longer explain your worth to people who are blind to it. Instead, you hold your head high and let your actions speak louder than your words. You stop proving and start living. And in that shift, people begin to see the difference. Those who value you rise closer, and those who wanted to use you fall away. That's not loss. That's clarity. Respecting yourself doesn't mean you never feel hurt. It doesn't mean you never struggle. It doesn't mean you don't have moments of doubt. It simply means that even in the middle of pain, you refuse to abandon yourself. You don't throw away your dignity just to keep someone else comfortable. You don't betray your values just to avoid conflict. You don't sell your peace just to win approval. You choose you every single time. That choice is where your unshakable strength lies. The beauty of self-respect is that it grows stronger the more you practice it. Every time you say no, when you mean no, it gets stronger. Every time you walk away from disrespect, it gets stronger. Every time you stop over-explaining yourself, it gets stronger. Respect is like a muscle. You build it by using it. And the more you build it, the less anyone can ever touch it. And here's what's most important. Self-respect doesn't need revenge. It doesn't need recognition. It doesn't even need validation. It is enough on its own. You don't need someone else to admit they were wrong in order to stand tall. You don't need closure from the people who broke you in order to heal. Respecting yourself means you create closure within yourself. You create peace within yourself. You create worth in yourself. And no matter what anyone says or does, they cannot take that away. Respecting yourself is the one thing they can't steal. They can try to break it, twist it, or bury it. But as long as you hold on to it, you remain untouchable. Because the truth is, people can only steal what you hand over. And once you realize that yourself, respect belongs only to you. You stop handing it out for free. You guard it, you protect it, and you live by it. That is the kind of power no one can take. At the end of the day, the greatest shift happens when you realize you don't need to fight on their level to win. You don't need louder words, sharper comebacks, or endless explanations. What you need is strength, disguised as calm, power hidden in silence, and clarity that no manipulation can twist. You need boundaries that remind you it's your door to open, not theirs. And above all, you need respect for yourself, so deep that no one else's chaos, no one else's games, and no one else's opinion can touch it. That's how you stop playing their game and start leading your own. Not with noise, but with peace. Not with reaction, but with discipline. Not with fear, but with respect. And when you live that way, you don't just survive the narcissist. You destroy the illusion of their power and take back what was always yours, your freedom.